We'd like you to welcome Mr. Leon Thomas.
I came to this town, was tired of moving around. I came to get straight, I had to get straight, no time to waste. God knows I had to make haste. Good things are moving, no time for doodling. I used to wonder how when everything seemed profound or feeling late, I had to get straight. Just straighten up time, no time for chasing around. I'm trying to keep up, I've got to keep up. You wanna know why? Because they're waiting in line. I'm in a hurry, no time to worry. You see, to me it really matters what comes, it really doesn't. So I'm chasing it straight.
I thought before I got into the things we talked about, classical and the professor and all that stuff, that I would first introduce some background again about maybe daily life in the 298th Army Band, which would sort of lay the framework. I did not go for the classical lessons. It took me a few months before I realized or got up the courage to go search for this. So we will do this episode and talk about sort of like daily life at the 298th Army Band, and that will lead us into that classical training part next. So like I said, one of the things, now I had been there for a day or two, and I very quickly, began to meet some people and get the lay of the land, so to speak. And I told you about that one incident on the bus, where the bus was rocking crazily back and forth. And I found out sort of how this was all, this was all about. There basically was two major factions in this band, in the Army unit that was there. There was the probably 3/4 of the group, 75% or so, 70, 77, 75% were draftees, people who had no desire to be there, putting it mildly. And then there was the other 25% that were, I guess we called them lifers, the ones who were, I guess you could think of it as professional Army military people. They were the ones who were the officers, the ones in charge. And of course there was extreme tension between the two, and especially at this time during that, this was a horrible time in the Vietnam period. Most of the draftees, the group that I was in, were extremely talented musicians. Most of them were taken right out of music school. They were probably headed to various orchestras in the United States. They were really highly skilled musicians. There was several oboists, and they were really wonderful musicians. I know Oberlin and Eastman graduates, heavy hitters. So I was surrounded by a lot of highly educated musical people, and just in general highly educated people. And the military people, or quote lifers, there was a number of them that were also very, very good musicians, but not trained like those other people were. And so there was a lot of underlying tension there. It's just the way it was, the whole situation. Very political, and that was like the underlying cause. So as time went on, I began to realize that it was a sort of a never-ending battle. And at the root of this, or one of the main causes, was the warrant officer who was in charge of the band, and his name was, don't tell me I'm going to forget it now. After all these years, I can't. I was just talking about it. I'll come back to that. The warrant officer, anyway. All the younger people, all the draftees, just despised him. He was absolutely. I don't know. I don't even know how to put it. He just didn't have a clue about the music, and this of course rubbed them all the wrong way. So it was just it seemed like a never-ending game trying to discredit him in any way. So we would have these major performances because this was in Berlin at that time. We had a lot of really high visibility job kind of things that we had to perform. I'll tell stories about a couple of them, but the goal was pretty much, I found out from the get-go, was to sort of sabotage anything that he was about to get credit for, so to speak. So that seemed to be one of the things. So before I get off and start telling stories about that, I'm just going to get back to my initial thoughts were to be just to tell you how living went in the Army there at that particular location. And so the whole there was some band members, by the way, draftees and lifers that were married, and they did not live in the barracks in the Army building there, the 298th Army building. They lived off outpost, I don't know where, but I had several very good friends who I became very good friends with that were married and weren't there. So it was kind of like just going to work for them. So we had a morning roll call. That's how the day started for us. And I think it was like at 7 or 7:30, something like that. And everybody, you had to show up there, and they literally took roll to make sure everybody was accounted for. And then at that thing, you went through daily announcements, and you sort of were given, or rather assigned different things for the day, and what was going to be rehearsed today, and if we had any performances, all that kind of stuff. So you sort of got like the outline for the day, what was going to be going on and what you were going to be doing. So along with all the musical duties, which I'll talk in more detail about as we go along, there was also, as you would expect, all kinds of maintenance kind of cleanup stuff that we had to do, because we were responsible for keeping the building clean. So of course there was cleaning the toilets, the bathrooms, all that stuff. So we didn't have to do it every day, but so it was like a rotating schedule. Some you'd get 1 week where it was your turn to clean the latrine and all that stuff. So that was kind of normal to be expected. And so that was part of it. We also had outdoor, like, for example, in the fall, we would have to clean up leaves, go outside and rake. And in fact, if you recall back from my previous episode, I had mysteriously lost my record, my shot records, and my other papers. And a couple days after we were there, I got sent out with a group of other guys to do raking outside the building. And lo and behold, after 45 minutes or so of raking, someone in the group stumbled upon outside and laying on the ground in leaves my papers. Mysteriously. I mean, there is no way that those records were blown off my footlocker. They were sitting on top of my footlocker in that room that we talked about, and there's just no way that the wind took those and blew them out that window. Not possible. So that to this day also remains a mystery. And the good news is I got them back. So that was one of the things we had to do, was clean up the building, all that stuff kind of thing. I was trying to remember, and I got a couple pictures that'll be showing. And the Berlin winters they were very cold, but there was not much, I don't recall much snow. I was thinking about that the other day. I don't think they had a lot of snow. They're located quite up north, so they did get that whole effect of, in the winter time it was very dark. Almost, I think there was only 2 or 3 hours of light in the afternoon, so it would be dark until like probably 11, 12 o'clock, and then we'd get a little bit of light, and then it would be by 4 o'clock it would be dark again. And just the opposite in the summertime, it was light all the time. I mean, you only got a couple hours of darkness. So that was kind of very interesting, and I never did get used to it because I wasn't there all that long. But the summertime was nice, but boy, that wintertime, that was a long, dark period, and it was cold. So we had all that going on. So that was like the normal kind of daily stuff. Along with that, we also had to do military exercise kind of things. And fortunately, that wasn't too often. It's a couple times a year, maybe quarterly. We had to go out and do some maneuvers and things like that, where you set up tents and that kind of stuff. Just stand around doing nothing, kind of thing. And then we, have to clean our weapons. We actually did have weapons. It was a storm in the armory, and have to go down there and clean them once a month or something like that. But that was pretty much the only time we ever saw them that I can recall. I don't remember ever horsing with them there in Berlin. So we did all that kind of stuff too. So there was a little military stuff, and of course there was we had a marching band, and then there was that rehearsal schedule. I said about every day we rehearsed a number of ensembles. So we had a marching band, we had a concert band, we had a stage/dance band kind of thing, and then we had the ambassadors, which was like a smaller ensembles, and there was a myriad of a number of different size combos that we had to sort of fit whatever the occasion we had to be performing for. And Bert was now preparing to depart, so I ended up assuming all his duties in the various ensembles. And it was very interesting. So there was a lot of different groups. So I ended up playing a lot because I was involved in a lot of different things, and also because of that whole situation with Howard Vivian. That's the warrant officer's name. I knew it would come to me. Howard Vivian. He's the one that I told you about that made the grand assumption that because I played bass and because I used to play trumpet, I should be able to play tuba. Well, he also then extended that, and this band was when I got there, a lot of the guys were just about getting ready to leave. So very quickly. The number of guys that were there were dwindling, and there weren't many people coming in because I think most of them are being sent to Vietnam that were available. So we were really running short on people, and as each instrument began to dwindle, good old Howard would have me sort of give a shot at filling in until we got a replacement of an actual person who played that instrument. So I ended up having to play, for example, I played trumpet, a baritone horn, valve trombone, various percussion instruments, tuba of course, and both the electric and string bass. So that was it was very interesting. Kind of crazy, but I sort of pulled it off. I wouldn't call myself able to play any of those other instruments, but I was able to get by at least make it look like I was doing something. So that went on, and there was one incident when we were about to the trumpet section just dwindled down. It really dwindled down to nothing. I think actually I was the only, for a short while, I was the only trumpet player, which was tremendous, a lot of pressure on me because I had to play lead trumpet on many of these things. I'm not a trumpet player, never was, so it was very difficult to try to get by and do that. But like I said, a lot of the guys were wonderful musicians in that band, so they covered for me a lot. Um, other instruments would play. They knew that I had trouble, so they would take over and cover for me. They were wonderful guys. So we got through that, but there was one incident that I'll never forget, and that was when it was in the dead cold of winter. I'll never forget this because some incident happened, and of course I don't know the details of this because they never told us, but I got sent to play taps at a funeral, and it was a young man, a military guy who I don't know how he died. Something happened, and it was an extremely sad situation. And you know me, I get real emotional. I can't even stand anything. So here I am out in this, I don't know, ungodly temperature. It was really way below zero, and I'm trying to play taps. First of all, with the trumpet, and the trumpet's freezing, sticking to my lips. It was hideous, and I mean, I was just playing. It was just horrible. And then I'm crying on top of it, and so the tears are freezing on my face. It was just the most horrible situation. So I'll never forget that one. But that was my tap story. Oh boy. I'm trying to think now. Oh, the other interesting job that I had was, and I don't remember how this came about, but somehow I was selected, or I know I didn't volunteer because my father told me, as I think I mentioned, how does that saying go? They used to tell me, never stand when you can sit, never sit when you can lay down, and never ever volunteer for anything. So I don't think I volunteered with this, but somehow I got roped into driving. Like they needed a driver for those big military trucks, like for delivering, what troops would ride in, which sometimes we would use to transport the band. But most of the time we would drive a big army bus, like the one I told you they were rocking in. So I ended up I got sent to driving school in Berlin, and to learn how to drive those big vehicles, which was kind of fun. I remember that. It's kind of neat. Driving around those big, huge buses in those tiny old streets in Berlin. It was very interesting. So that was another thing but I don't think I actually ever got the. I guess that was kind of like a backup. I don't remember actually having driving anybody there and anybody around any place. So, but at least I guess I could have if I needed to. So then after all that, we got a sort of little background there. We also, I'm just thinking about the mornings we would get up and would have that, and we would go after the morning roll call and getting ready, we would prepare to have our first rehearsals. We would run over. There was a cafeteria kind of thing, a couple buildings away, that was not. It was a German cafeteria, and of course they did serve a lot of Americanized. We can look at it that way, food, because they were servicing all of us. So that was the one nice thing about this is. Like other Army facilities, we used to have to do KP and stuff. Well, we didn't have to do any of that here because it was all outsourced to the Germans. So that was a nice little cafeteria, and we used to have breakfast there pretty much every morning. It was a little, 15, 20 minutes, have a quick breakfast, and then come back and start rehearsing. So that was kind of like the daily thing. And then, of course, there was all the performances, and we did a lot of performances. We used to play, the marching band. We would play for football games, all kinds of celebrations, any kind of thing. And the Germans have lots of those. And then with the concert band, we used to do a lot of concerts, and a lot of the big ones were, like I said, they had at that time. If you look back in history, you know that there was 4 powers: the British, French, Soviet Union, and the United States were in Berlin, kind of like occupying it all together. And there was this competitive thing going on between them. It seemed like it was for everything. Marching band, there was marching band competitions. and there was concert band competitions. So all this led to this thing that I talked about before. Like I remember one time, the biggest one was at the Sports Palace, which I think I have a picture of that I'll be showing during this, I hope. And it was a huge sports complex kind of thing where they had concerts, and things. So there was this big event that we rehearsed for months for, and it was going to be this huge thing where all the four powers would be there and all their full concert bands, and there was a competition, and it was a great honor to be playing in it, and also a great honor if you could win the competition. So the young guys came up with this plan to what they were going to do is have all of us young guys, draftees, the non-lifers, we were going to play, when it came time to do the performance, we were going to play everything a half a step out of key, which you understand that would make everything sound terribly dissonant, horrible. So I tell you, I was scared. I thought, oh my God, we're going to get court-martialed for this again, or something's going to happen. This is not going to be good. But we did it, and when we did it, all the Army guys, the regular decent musicians, they knew what we were doing, and they were kind of shocked. They were shocked and kind of laughing, and you could see all the rest of the bands, all the musicians in the other bands, all knew what we were doing. And I said, "Oh my God, we're in trouble." So I remember we get back to the our band building afterwards, and I was kind of, "Oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen." And later on that night, as I think I was returning from some job or something, probably at the Jazz Gallery or something, and I stopped and I talked to as you walk in these doors, there's always a security guard there, and there's a little room there where they check things in. You have to check in there and sign in and all that stuff. I went in there and talked to this guy, and he told me, the reviews came in from the concert. I said, "They did?" And he said, "Yeah." And so Howard Vivian wrote down that we did a great job. It was absolutely perfect. So this guy, after all this, he didn't even notice what we did. So I mean, it was very frustrating. So nothing these guys did ever really worked with him. He just didn't get it. He was such a bad musician that they couldn't, no matter what they did. Another time we were doing another competition. We were doing marching band, and everybody had. He had this plan where if you'd have ever had anything to do with marching bands, you never split the band up. And he insisted that we split the band and come from opposite directions, which is like the worst thing you can do, because you're going to be out of sync. There's no getting around it. So that's what happened. But instead of trying to correct it, all the young guys said, "No, don't correct it. Make it worse." And in fact, I want, he tells me, "Fid, I want you," and I don't remember who, Martinez, I guess Martinez was the other. He said, "I want you to, inadvertently drop your tuba or sousaphone, let it unhook from the strap, and, sort of kind of get out of whack and lose your step and all that crap." So they had plans for everything to make it a disaster. And once again, after all is said and done, no, he didn't even notice. I mean, everybody else noticed, but the guy who counted didn't notice. So I don't think while I left there, he was still going strong, and as far as I know, no one ever got him. So yeah, it was a crazy situation. So here's one more little story I've been thinking about. Let me just look at my list here. I'll tell the story about Martinez moving into the haunted room. There you go. All right, so let's get back. I think in the last episode I told you about my experience trying to use the haunted room, or the baby room where the Hitler's experiments occurred, which didn't go well for me. So I never went back to that room. But Martinez, the tuba player, he lived a few way down the hall someplace, and there was something I don't remember the reason. I don't know whether he wanted a little more room, and it bugged him because that room was empty. He just didn't buy into any of this haunted stuff. So, or maybe he wasn't getting along with his roommate. I'm not sure what it was, but he insisted that he was going to move into that room and have his own room. So he grabbed all his things and he moved in there, and he stayed there. And he came to the first night. I think what happened the first night was, if I remember it correctly, it got so cold in his room. He had like 3 or 4 blankets on. He finally had to leave the room and go sleep back at the other room. He just couldn't deal with it. So then he came back, and they supposedly had the heat fixed the next day. Then he went back in there again. The next night he was in there. A couple little strange things happened, but the worst thing was that during the middle of the night, the water pipes right above his head broke and just dumped water all over him. So that was it for him. He got out of there, and that was the last time that I ever knew of anyone trying to go in that room. So that room was really something else. And there was all kinds of stories about previous people that I never met. And I guess I told you in the beginning, there was one person, I don't remember his name now, but supposedly he actually went crazy, and he was discharged, and I don't know what happened to him. But yeah, so there was all kinds of stories about that. So the other part of it, the other one little things, we used to do a lot of, like I said, a lot of big events. And this one particular time, which was wonderful, we had the ambassadors. We had a small group. And, I think it was like tenor and piano, bass, and drums, and maybe a couple other instruments. Pretty small group though. And we were playing at the Four Powers building, which I think I'm going to have a picture of. And this is the building that where all the Four Powers would meet to sign treaties and stuff like that. It was a very formal thing. So we all had our dress blues on. It was very formal. And we were playing. I was playing string bass. And suddenly, we got stopped, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody brought Duke Ellington was there, and I don't know why he was there, but he was in Berlin. And this is like, I think maybe 2.5 years before he passed away. So he was, pretty old, but he was looking okay. He didn't appear to be ill or anything at that point. So he was very gracious, and he, shook each of our hands, and we actually got to meet him. And then he asked if we wouldn't mind playing a couple of tunes with him. So this was remarkable. I actually got to play a couple of tunes with Duke Ellington. It was really totally unexpected, and really to this day I can't believe that happened. So I actually got to meet him and play with him. We played Satin Down. I don't remember what the other tune was, but a couple of tunes, and it was just real nice and easy. But he was great. He was so wonderful, very nice. So that's about how daily life was there. And so what happened now is, as we went along, and these experiences built up, and I was there, probably 2 or 3 months, and I ended up. I think I had joined. As I mentioned to you, there was many orchestras. They had community orchestras, like I don't know how many of them, and these orchestras were really good. They were pretty close to professional level orchestras, quite impressive. And I'm trying to remember how I got involved with one of them. I think I remember there was one thing we had played. We were playing for a show. It was like some kind of a theater thing that we were not really directly involved, but they sort of brought us in to help. It was actually the play. It was Charlie Brown, the musical. So I was playing this musical there, and at this theater, and each day there was this girl, a young girl at that time, who was like stage manager kind of a thing. And so she was really nice, and I ended up, we talked for a few times, and she was cool. So I kind of figured she must have been one of the officers' daughters or something. I didn't know who she was. So anyway, we sort of became friends over. I think this play lasted for a week or two. So we became friends, and I remember went out to lunch one time, and I think it was lunch. And we went to this German restaurant, and we were ordering something, and all of a sudden she starts speaking German. I mean, perfect German. And I was like stunned because I didn't have any idea she spoke German. And I asked her, where did you learn to speak German like that? And she said, well, I'm German. I said, what? So it turns out, she starts telling me the story. She was German. She had learned English by listening to the radio. And I mean, I would never had a clue. She had all the slang down, everything. There was no way that you could tell she wasn't. I thought she was an American. I thought I would have given anything. Never believed it. Anyway, we became very, very good friends, and I actually brought her with me whenever I had to go, like when I went to buy my bass. When I went to go buy the good bass, I brought her with me to help me negotiate and to fully understand what they were telling me, and so I could explain what I wanted. So that was nice that I got to know her, and it was a funny story because I really didn't have any idea she was German. I think it was Doris who sort of encouraged me to get hooked up with one of these community orchestras. So I did that, and it was quite lovely. And that reminds me of another little story that goes along with that. As you recall, when Bert first took me down to the bass shop, I didn't have anything with it. I didn't have a bowl or anything, and I needed. There was no French bows. They didn't have any French bows around Germany. So I was looking at the shop, and I asked them if they had any way I could get a French bow. And they looked around the shop, and they found it was back in a corner someplace. They had this really old French bow there. So I ended up buying that when I bought that first bass, and I had this bow, and I still have that bow today. And it turns out that it's a hand carved Frechner bow, H.R. Frechner, which turns out to be a very rare, very very rare bow, which is very expensive. So, however, I think it's lost a lot of its value because it was at some point many years ago damaged. So anyway, I had this bow, and I had a French bow, so I started playing in these community orchestra along with I think there was a lot of the guys. Oh, that's what it was. Maybe it wasn't. It was some of the guys in the band, and these guys, the orchestral guys. They got me hooked up into this orchestra, the community orchestra. So I had been doing this for a while, which then led me to decide, my God, while I'm here, I got to take lessons. So that's where we're going to next go over to the Berlin Conservatory, and that's when I first meet Professor Rainer Zepovitz. And maybe I'll tell you one more little story about a couple of the musicians. There's a lot of great musicians I told you that were there, but there was a couple in particular that I'll never forget. And one's alto saxophone player. His name was Charlie Condon. He was absolutely strictly a classical, and he was a wizard, classical player. I've never seen anybody that can, he just read anything, and he was just incredible, technical, beautiful player. Well, he started. We became friends, and he started hanging around with the jazz crew, and he sort of started hearing John Coltrane and others like in that vein. He just fell in love with this, and he just said he was mesmerized. But he said, "How? What is he doing? How does he do it?" And this guy got a whole bunch of Coltrane albums, and he went to his room, and he used to stay in there for hours, and he would just transcribe and analyze what Coltrane was doing. He actually had all this stuff written out. All these crazy solos that he would take, he would transcribe them and then analyze what he was doing. And then he started coming to the Jazz Gallery, and I think I've got some pictures of him playing with us there at the Jazz Gallery. And he did it. It was incredible. He actually was able to, translate and understand what John Coltrane was doing. So he actually was able to apply that to his own playing, which I've never seen anybody able to do that. That was pretty remarkable. And then we had another wonderful trumpet player that came. Thank God he came, because he saved my life from having to play so much trumpet. Ted Murdoch, who was a young disciple of Freddie Hubbard in that style. Freddie Hubbard had just come on the scene not too much before this, and he was he was greatly inspired by him. Let's put it that way. So Ted was great, and we have some pictures of him there too. And the other one, most important one probably, which will come later in the story, was Barney Rooker, great tenor player, who he was one of the married guys, so I didn't hang around him so much except for in the band. So we used to play a lot of combos together, and you'll see him in some of the pictures too, Barney. And he left the Army shortly after Bert left, I think. Went back home to Columbus, Ohio. And you'll see that will tie in at a later point in the story, a couple episodes down the road. All right, I think we're at the approaching 40 minute, or about 36-7 minutes. So I think we'll call this episode quits and get ready for my first encounter with the great Professor Rainier Zepidus.